Today we'll be discussing Her Two by Bonnie Kistler. And we might have a few more joining us as we get started.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Okay, everyone's on. That's on so far. We have about 4 more that might join throughout that had RSVP'd for tonight.
Okay.
So before we get started, I wanted to thank you again, Bonnie, for joining us. I really enjoyed the book. I actually just finished it today. For everyone who this might be the first novel of Bonnie's you've read, Bonnie is a former Philadelphia attorney and the author of House on the Fire and Cage. So if you loved this book, you might want to check out some of her other ones. She spent her law career in private practice with major law firms and private law firms, and her husband now split their time between Florida and North Carolina, and a lot of us on the call today are from Florida.
Yes.
What area are you in?
I'm on the Gulf Coast near Tampa.
Okay, nice. We're kind of everywhere. We have someone from Tampa that might be joining us soon.
Oh, great.
The majority are in Miami, I believe, except for Belissa.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy talking to book clubs because I don't have to worry about spoilers anymore. When I'm touring, when a book is just released, I have to be so careful not to give away, any of the plot details. Whereas that's, the most interesting thing to discuss. And I'm so happy when book clubs invite me to come and I get to hear what they think about how the plot evolved and what the twists were and so forth.
I loved that twist at the end. We'll get to that. But before we talk about this, the actual storyline, I wanted to know if you would be able to tell us a little bit on how the idea came to be and your writing process for it, and how long was the process from conception to publishing?
The idea came to me while, like most of the country or the world, I was riveted by the trials of some celebrity defendants, some high-profile media figures who were on trial for sex crimes. And I can name the names. We all know who they are. Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, R. Kelly. And what struck me in each of these cases was that they had female defense counsel. And I was really intrigued by this. And I could easily understand why the man would want to hire a woman to represent him. I think that it sends a nice message to the jury that, oh, look, he must be a decent guy if she's defending him. And, all the subliminal signals were there. But the more interesting question is, why would she want to represent him? These were wealthy men. These were not, assigned public defender cases. These were attorneys who had a choice as to who they wanted to represent, and they chose these cases. So I was really, my mind started spinning as to what reasons there might be beyond just pure, ambition or greed. There could be something else. So I decided to invent a character who had some perhaps compelling reasons in her personal life for choosing this path, but what the consequences would be. And I thought, well, one consequence that's pretty obvious, and I think it happened to some degree to these women attorneys that I'm talking about, is a lot of hate mail from women and being picketed and reviled and called, traitors to their gender and so forth. But then I thought, what would happen if the tables were ever turned and she herself became the victim of a sex crime? And that was the genesis of the idea. It didn't take me long to write. These really? Trials were in the fairly recent, past. They weren't long ago. So that's when the germ of the idea hit me. And probably within a year's time, I had the book finished. And it was the second book in a 2-book deal with HarperCollins. So I already had a place for it to go. And it was, so there was not a long route from there to publication.
What is your favorite time of the day to write?
It's usually early morning.
Yeah.
Actually, I get up very early, so early that people who are a lot more fun than me are just starting to come home. but I'm up and I like the stillness of that time of really night into morning and having the house be very quiet and the street is quiet. And I almost feel like I'm still in a dream state and I feel like things flow a lot then. But I will say that once I'm really, really deep in the trenches of a book, And especially when the goalpost is in sight, I can write any time of the day, and I will have, sprints that go, morning to night. So it really doesn't matter then. But when in the early stages, when I'm really just trying to get it going, early morning works best for me.
Do you kind of like outline the story, or are you surprised as you go writing, like where it ends up?
I always know the beginning, the launch pad, and where I want it to end. I seldom know how I'm going to get there. That comes along the way. There's any of you who are regular mystery readers probably have heard this expression between the two different schools of mystery writers: the plotters, who outline everything, and those that they call the pantsers, who fly by the seat of their pants. And I'm not flighty enough to be a pantser. I'm definitely not a plotter, but I'm not a pantser. And I just recently heard another description of these two schools of thought that call one school the architects, who plan out every detail, every specification, everything before they nail the first board. And then the gardeners, plant a seed, and they see it come up. And when it's up, then they think, well, that would go there. And then they build a whole garden. And that metaphor works really well for me, because I am a gardener in real life.
Oh.
So I like that idea. So instead of calling myself a pantser, I'll say I'm a gardener.
If anybody has any questions throughout, just like flag me down or interrupt us. I want this to be more of a conversation. I know we have a couple of lawyers maybe on here listening, so if you have a different insight, chime in.
I had a question around,
No, go.
Oh, I had a question around the husband, because at the beginning, I don't know if that was your intention, or I assumed there was a husband at home who was taking care of things, and kind of like she was busy, but he was holding down the fort back at home. And then obviously, I don't know if it's that in that same first chapter, or
very soon,
subsequent one, but you realize like her husband is home, but obviously in this coma, basically, or I don't know, vegetative state.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to kind of get your thought behind having him be in that, in that condition. Like, where did that idea come from? Because I feel like it really was a significant part of, at least for me as I read, of the story.
Yeah, you're right. I did a deliberate misdirection at the very beginning when she's talking to or texting Todd. And so you think, well, Todd is the husband at home holding down the fort. And then, of course, you learn that Todd is the healthcare worker, and the husband hasn't had a conversation with her for, a long time. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to have a compelling reason for her to make the decision to switch from prosecuting these men to actually defending them. And I wanted it to be financial. I think that we don't see a lot of that in fiction. I think of just really the need to pay the bills and she wanted to maintain a lifestyle for her children, and she had obligations for his, daughter from his first marriage, and she had all of these burdens. And I mean, some women in that position might have just thrown their hands up and, moved back home with mom and dad or something. But, Kelly's a much more resourceful person. She makes this choice. Now, a lot of people could still question the choice. And I think a lot of people could legitimately question her choice to keep her husband in this vegetative state. I mean, after all, the doctors and the insurance company said, pull the plug. And she, out of love for Adam, but we have to remember, Kelly's fatal flaw is that she loves to win. She's very competitive. She wants to win at all costs. And so she really has set this up in her mind as being a contest or a battle between her and the medical establishment, and that she's going to win. He's going to come out of this coma, and she's going to be the victor. And it's obviously a very misguided, and she doesn't realize it until the end. But anyway, that was what I worked in to be her motivation for why she would represent these, really pretty heinous people.
Now that you say that, for me, it surprised me that was her drive to keep the husband alive, like a will to win. Because reading it, I was like, wow, what great love she has. Like,
well, she had
a lot of work. And then when you mentioned like the last chapter that it was her want to win that drove her, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. But I hadn't like made that click yet.
Yeah. It's a character flaw, I think. And I have to confess, it's one that I shared during all my years of practicing law. I didn't have the luxury of always representing the, quote, good guys. I never represented anybody as bad as George Benedict, thank God. And I never did criminal law, so I never would have been in that position. But it was my desire to win and sort of the intellectual drive to show that my arguments were better than the other side's would allow me to kind of look past any kind of moral qualms I might have had about the rightness or wrongness of my client's position. Kelly's a more extreme version of that same mindset.
Which character do you relate to or identify the most with?
Well, I think it would have to be Kelly. There's a little bit of me that doesn't identify with, but as much as admire Ashley, the real career woman, you know, the one who was always going to put her career first and who, you know, had good reasons. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that my major theme for this book is that silence is the enemy of justice. And that by keeping silent, these women who accept the payouts and sign the NDAs are just enabling this man to go on and do it again and again and again. And Ashley's decision that she was, you know, she immediately decided what her value in the workplace was and put some dollar signs on the table. And that was, you know, her calculation. And then even at the end, even after everything that's come out, she's not going to go public with the fact that she was also one of Benedict's victims, because her career means so much to her that she did. I think she said she didn't want to be standing up in front of a boardroom and having the men in the room trying to visualize what Benedict might have done to her. You know, she just wanted to not that her body is not part of this conversation, you know, and just keep that out of it. And so I admire her for that, but she's a lot tougher than I would ever be. So I can't really say I identify with her.
Kelly's stepdaughter, Courtney, accuses her of being a gender traitor and complicit of her client's crimes. Do you believe this is a fair accusation? And anybody else want to chime in on your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing from the lawyers if there are lawyers on the call. But I think the point is that every defendant deserves a zealous defense, an attorney who does his or her best to represent them, short of, you know, defrauding the court or the jury or whatever. Every attorney doesn't need to take every case. And Kelly didn't need to take these cases. And I think that by virtue of, and not just defending them in court, I mean, I think the real harm that was done was when she swooped in with the check in one hand and the NDA in the other, and immediately took steps to silence these women. Clearly, that made her complicit, I think, because she, especially after she represented, you know, him in not just the first one, but the second and the third, she knows that by virtue of doing this, she's allowing him to remain free to do it again. And there's no suggestion that she ever even took him aside and said, gee whiz, George, could you get some help here or something? You know, she never invaded that space in her mind. She kept it strictly professional. This is what she needed to do, and she did it.
How did you? Go ahead.
I was going to say, and she, you know, lives with the consequences, which are pretty horrendous.
How did you balance making her such a likable character while supporting a guy who did such heinous things? I think if any of us would be watching a woman on TV representing a guy like this, behaving as she did, or later coming out that she was behind, like that last scene on the steps where she says that she was guilty of it just as much as he was because she encouraged it by giving them the NDAs. But yet I found her to be such a likable character otherwise. Like, I wasn't reading it hating her. I don't know if anybody...
But probably not at the very beginning.
I agree.
I think that I've heard from a lot of readers who really did not like her at the beginning.
Yeah.
They said, this is really an unlikable... But then they're like, but she's a different person by the end of the book than the one that I didn't like at the beginning of the book. And I think it's important. It's something I always try to do as a novelist, is have a character arc. I don't think your main character should be the same person at the end of the book. You know, they are going through experiences that should change them. And I think Kelly is, of course, very much changed. So I'm glad that people like her at the end. And I understand and am sympathetic to people who don't like her at all at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I do think the part of the husband, her situation, it kind of does, I think, because when I learned that part of it, I was like, okay, right? Like, I still feel like she could have gone another direction with her life, yet I can at least sympathize to a certain degree with her.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't like her at the beginning at all. I was one of those people that I was like, why? How could she be, you know? And when she became the victim, then I sympathized more with her. I was like, wow, now she's the victim and she's doing all the things that she's not supposed to do. You know, she's not supposed to take a shower. Don't, no
Yeah.
evidence. No, I'm like, what are you doing? You know that this is wrong. How are you going to get him at the end? But yeah, I flipped it. I liked the flip at the end.
I had a question. There's a lot of potential cybercrimes, right, that you've embedded throughout. Like with,
I don't think we can hear you well.
Breaking up a little.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, Jenna's laptop is at me.
Sorry.
There's a lot of cyber crimes that you kind of weaved in, right? With both her son and kind of the nudity there, but like hacking into like Wi-Fi things around the home. How much experience do you have with kind of IT security and the research process that you must have gone to weave that into the story? I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, I don't have any more experience than the average person who has smart devices all over their home. The person whose name I dare not speak right now, or she'll talk back to me. But I just imagined the things that could happen. We've heard all this stuff about it's always listening, and it has to listen in order to learn and to respond to your voice. But then you think, what else is going on back there? And the idea that somebody else could hack into it is kind of frightening, and you think, whoa. So, I mean, don't know how much of what I had Kelly imagining happened, because remember, most of it didn't actually happen. She was imagining these things, and it turned out to be Benedict's wife, who was not even hacking in. She was just sexting with the boy. But I hope that it was at least realistic, that what Kelly was imagining could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I work in IT security, so a lot of what you said rang a lot of things for me. But I mean, I love that you created his victims to just be different demographics and powerful in their own right, kind of coming together in this Superwoman team. I just thought, not discriminating from a cleaner to a CIO. I think that was just really, really powerful, that there was each something they could contribute.
Yeah. And the message at the top of the book, it could happen to anyone, shows, that it's not just pretty young girls in short skirts who get raped. I mean, that's just such a lie. 90-year-old women are asleep in their apartment and they can get raped. It's a different kind of crime than what people like to dismiss it as. And I thought portraying all these different women in their different situations. Ashley was actually in a romantic relationship with him, and he rapes her out of spite when she tries to break up with him. Emily is an employee. Riza is an employee. And then the poor cleaner was just there at a time when he happened to be sexually aroused. It was nothing. It's not the women. It's not the women. It's something going on in his sick, disturbed mind. And that's why we portray the different kinds of women.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your thought process and kind of bringing in his wife as another, person that was disturbed, right? Not having him be the bad guy, but having the wife be complicit and a bad guy as well.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to
not see that coming.
All the different ways that, first you want to pick somebody that you haven't guessed, but I wanted to portray all the different ways in which women could be said to be, quote, complicit in these men's crimes. Women who take cash and stay silent, women who defend him in trial, women who enable him by looking the other, wives and partners who look the other way or to excuse his behavior. You'll hear this. She was coming on to him. A woman will say about her own husband or partner, excusing his behavior. Now, that was her fault, like that Dolly Parton song that drives me crazy about "Don't take my," what's the song? Jolene.
Don't take my name.
Oh man.
I'm like, don't blame
just
Jolene,
because you can.
your cheating husband at fault here.
Yeah, it's true.
And then the other, and this is a very delicate, sensitive issue. I don't know if any of you are mothers of sons, but the extent to which a mother could be, quote, complicit in the way that she raises her son, that she doesn't teach him to respect women, that she allows him to objectify women. I'm a mother of daughters, so I have no room to talk about this at all. This is very second, third hand on my part, but it was just another issue I wanted to put out there of the different ways in which women are not responsible for the awful acts of these men, but need to examine their own behavior too.
Well, right, like for the mom choosing to connect via video games with her son, right, on that venue, you would think
Yeah.
predatory behavior is a very important conversation to have before going, right? She just wanted to find another avenue, right? But whether she thought through that this comes with some risky behaviors, and let's set some good groundwork with my son about what he could be the victim of a cybercrime and what's responsible. And she was worried, was he sharing pictures, and how far did this go, instead of having confidence that, oh, my son had, we talked about what was appropriate before he started playing these online.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I have a question.
Sure.
Okay. Do lawyers usually have like some sort of shady guy that does things like that? Do they have like
Javier,
somebody that they
Javier.
hire? Javier. It's my
Sexy
husband's
Javier.
name.
Criminal defense lawyers usually do have some kind of investigator on staff. If not on
Yeah.
staff, at least on retainer that they can call on. And now the question of the shady behavior is another issue. And the idea that Javier was, borderline seducing these women in order to find out information, to get dirt on them. I hope that most lawyers would not countenance their investigators behaving this way. But
Did I feel like a little bit of that she was like almost in love with him?
Oh,
Kelly was? Like I felt like a little bit of a connection, like she would say to herself, like, oh, I love him. Or did I catch something like that? No.
You think that may have been me, the author, coming through because I found him so sexy?
I don't know. It was, right? Maybe.
But I don't think Kelly was. No, I don't think Kelly was in love with him. And I'm not even sure that, I tried to leave a hint at the end of a possible relationship with the journalist, Rick.
Yeah.
Was that his name?
Yeah.
I haven't read it as you have.
I know. No,
But
I read it a while
I think
too.
she's a long way from being able to fall in love with anybody else again. I think that that's a remote possibility for her. And I think that she liked Javier, but I don't think she felt anything romantic.
Yeah.
Javier was like Kalinda from The Good Wife, if anyone
Yes,
watched that.
that's right. She had a full-time investigator. That's right.
Yeah.
That's Ali's TV influence on the.
Always.
I don't know if I missed this in the beginning, but can you talk about? I'm an attorney, so I think it's interesting when I talk to attorneys about going different career paths. So, how did you go from being a practicing attorney to being an author? And again, sorry if I missed this.
No, I didn't go into that.
Yeah, are you still practicing at all, or is it completely writing now?
I always wanted to be a writer. I thought I would be a writer as a kid. I wrote as a kid. I went to college and majored in English thinking I was going to be a novelist. And I sort of got a, cold dose of reality when I sent a novel off to a big time New York publisher when I was a sophomore and got it back almost by return mail, just told her. And I thought, this is harder than I thought. It was a real cold shower wake up call. And I thought, I do not want to be one of those starving artist in the attic kind of person. I want to be able to earn a living, a decent living. And what else can I do? And of course, English majors are one of the main avenues into a law. And I knew I'd be working with words, and I liked words, so I liked forming arguments, persuasive arguments. So I thought, well, okay, I'll go to law school. Went to law school, got into the whole big law firm, churning life, very busy, having a young family at the same time, no time to write, but I couldn't escape the bug. I still had it. I still had stories brewing. I'd have a case and it would trigger an idea. Well, what if this would have happened instead of this? And back in the 90s, I wrote my first novel in longhand on a yellow legal pad on the train, commuting to work, back and forth every day.
Cool.
Eventually, I was able to put aside the law and make it a real career. But it was always my goal. The law was a route to get there. But that being said, I don't regret having done it. I think obviously all of my books have been inspired by the law in some way or another. All of my protagonists tend to be female lawyers. So it's informed my writing in a myriad ways. And I also have to say that when young people come to me and say that they want to be a writer, I always say, great, that's wonderful, become something else first. Because I think you need to experience the real world, the wider world, in order to have material worth writing about. I don't think you can go right from school and reading a bunch of books to sitting in a cabin in the woods and writing books. You need more reality in there, unless you're writing, I don't know anything about fantasy.
Fantasy.
I can't speak. But if you're writing realistic fiction, I think that it helps to have another life outside your writing life. And I'm glad I did.
We've had the opportunity to speak to a few authors, and another one that had the switch from lawyer to author was Emily Giffen, although
Oh,
her
yes.
novels are a completely different genre than yours, but she also, I think, practiced law, but just for a couple of years and then
Yeah.
switched as well.
Yeah, I think I spend more time in the trenches than a lot of the lawyer authors that you see around. Lisa Scottolini, my fellow Philadelphian, only practiced for 2 or 3 years before she, became a full-time writer. Whereas I was in the trenches for 20 years. I mean, I really have an awful lot of legal experience under my belt.
We kind of touched upon this, but it was one of my questions down below, but I'm going to bring it to the top about Kelly discovering her 14-year-old son sexting. I kind of imagined that it was going to be not a teenage girl, but I never thought it was going to be the wife.
Me neither.
Do you think the boys, and this is open to anybody for discussion, do you think the boys' behavior is a result of normal teenage behavior, or do you think it's evidence of boys being trained to objectify women from early on? And I think Bonnie kind of mentioned this, like, as women, moms, aunts, like, what can we do to help steer the ship? Anyone?
I have a 19-year-old. I always tell him, would you like someone to be doing that to your mother? Like, always think of the women, like, if it's your mother. So that's kind of like the path that I try to, take him on.
And I don't know if it's me, but I wanted to kind of give the boy, benefit of the doubt. It certainly seemed that the wife was preying on the boy to some respect, right? And
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
where she had an agenda, I think it was calculated what she was doing. It wasn't like an oopsie. So, but I think it brings up a good point to prepare our boys for potential traps, right? Yet you're not seeking out to objectify, but when the opportunity presents itself, what's right and what's wrong, right? I think it's the opportunity that makes it hard for boys.
It's true.
I made him 14, which is, right at that age, I think, of puberty and sexual awakening and sexual curiosity. So I hoped and thought when I was creating his character that it was just ordinary adolescent curiosity that was and not that he really had the seeds of a future predator himself, but that he could go that way if not steered in the right direction, and that it was important to kind of nip this in the bud.
That's what I liked about it, that it was a learning experience for him to hopefully keep him on the right path for longer term, in life.
I like her discussion with him at the end of the book about it. Like, it can happen to any woman. Like, when he kept saying, like, I can't believe it happened to you, she's like, and this person, all the other women it happened to. Like,
yes, and that's something like you often will hear politicians say, I never took this seriously until, but I have a daughter myself. And the question you have to say, if you didn't have a daughter, would you not take this seriously? It happens to women whether you're related to them or not, and you need to broaden your horizons here and think beyond just, because I have a daughter, I care about what happens to women. Care anyway.
Exactly.
What would you say? This is like a conversation I have often with men in my life, especially after like the Me Too movement. For women who, this is going to lead into my next question about accepting an NDA or accepting a payout to not go to trial, even though you publicly accused him. A lot of men say that that's just a cop-out. Like, you can't really believe a woman who accepted money, whether it was before or after. As a woman, I don't believe that. I feel like it was some kind of compensation, not for what they went through, but like what they had to endure and what they have to live with for the rest of their lives. Like, I think many of us would be surprised if you talk amongst your groups of friends how many have been sexually abused or molested or raped, or a friend or family member of them have been. Like, I think as women, it's way more, we realize it's way more common because we talk about it amongst each other than what men realize. So my question is, would you think that the payout would discredit a woman's testifying or coming forward?
I think that a defense lawyer, somebody like Kelly, would certainly use that against her to try to undermine her credibility in front of the jury. And, like in the case of Ashley, who preserved all the evidence, but she didn't call the police. She called her lawyer and said, I want to make a settlement demand, who immediately saw it in those terms. But I mean, it is in those terms. It is a crime, obviously, but it is also a tort. The lawyers here will agree with. It's a tort. And in civil law, if somebody commits a tort against you, you're entitled to compensation. It's not a terrible thing to have done that. Now, are there women who are venal and try to manipulate the situation? I'm sure there are some, but I wouldn't immediately paint them with that brush.
Was that
That's what I'm thinking. Like if there are women that will accuse a man without nothing happening to them, and then that's what makes the other women discredit it.
That's right.
Know?
Yeah, it kind of ruins it for everybody.
It ruins it. Yeah.
Was that the point of the story with the famous guy who was a cisgender?
Oh, I wanted to include, I mean, one of the hallmarks of the Me Too movement, which was good, which is believe women, because so often they were not believed. But I thought, women are just human beings and capable of lying under certain circumstances. Why not? And I wanted to include an example of a woman who would lie and what would be her reasons for lying. And I made it an extreme. I mean, she's an activist who wants to out this trans character. But I mean, she lied about about an attack that never happened. And that's one example of the situation where a woman might lie and say she was attacked. So
reading that, I immediately believed her until like the turn of events, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't expect that.
Did anybody guess that he was trans?
Yeah. But I thought it was awful of that woman to do that, because if she's an activist, then she would know that it's everyone's choice to come out as when they want and in their time, So that was.
If you remember back in the 80s, outing people against their will was a big factor of the gay rights movement, because they thought until everybody can see that it could be your next door neighbor, it could be your nephew, we won't normalize it. And so they made a big point out of, and it was very damaging to the people who wanted to live their own and were entitled to live their own private lives. But the activists thought that this was an important way to achieve their goals. And I was imagining, I don't know that it's true, but I was imagining that an activist might feel the same way about trans people who wanted to remain private in their selected gender. And that was why she was doing it. But it was a bad reason, and she dropped the case. So.
Yeah.
I see Rhonda joined us back there. She's the fellow Tampa person.
I live in Sarasota half the year.
You're muted.
No,
muted.
Still.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I had technical difficulties. I'm sorry, but I'm so excited to join even late. It was a great book. I loved it.
Thank you.
Rhonda is the editor, publisher of Tampa Metro Magazine. So I don't know if you've
with it in
that area.
Yes. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Back to the NDAs that the three women signed. They all had different reasons. Emily was kind of like coerced into it and was in a state where she wasn't really thinking. But it wasn't only NDAs for sexual reasons. Bryza signed one about her work with a vaccine. So can you talk to us a little bit about adding different NDAs into your story and your thoughts about NDAs in these situations in general?
Yeah, the reason and that actually was sort of a late breaking development in my process of writing this book was, what if Benedict wasn't the guy who discovered this? It was Riza all along. And one of the reasons I thought that is that when you talk about cancel culture and these men who are complaining, I've been canceled, I can't do my comic routine, whatever their complaint is. I think, what about all the women that they abused who have been canceled because their careers have been derailed by virtue of something happening to them, like all the women that, in Hollywood who couldn't get the parts they wanted because Weinstein was blackballing them, and they couldn't get work. They've been canceled too. And I thought, what if Benedict wasn't the great genius that everybody thinks he is, that it was Riza, his underling, who actually discovered this. And then, but she is so devoted to the science, and that she cares about the science and not about personal glory, that she wants to be sure that if I recall the science, that which I all made up, obviously, but she wanted to be sure that it was the cause and not just a correlation, and more research needed to be done for that. And she wanted to be sure that that research was going to be funded. And if she had to sign this agreement with Benedict, giving him full credit in order to make this happen, she was willing to do it. She was a pretty, noble, selfless scientist.
Yeah, I was surprised about that.
Yeah.
Back to what we touched on a little bit in the beginning about female lawyers taking on cases like this, and then the recent rise in these in the last few years has kind of calmed down now, but a few years ago. What difference do you think the gender of the counsel matters, and for the lawyers in the group? If a woman lawyer knows the main reason she's being chosen, like, would that hinder your acceptance or not of taking a case?
That's a good second question. Let me answer the first one first. I think in a case of a sex crime, it makes a huge difference if the man has a female attorney. I think that she can cross-examine the female victim, and even if she asked the identical questions that a male lawyer would have asked, it will seem softer. It'll seem more palatable to the jury. It won't seem like she's browbeating the poor woman. It won't seem like she's, being too aggressive. And so I think that she can get away with it in that way. I also, as I said earlier, I also think that it helps to kind of humanize her defendant, her client. She's sitting beside him, that she can do all those little subtle things like, whispering in his ear and patting him on the shoulder and doing all this stuff to make the jury send these little signals like he must be an okay guy, or this woman wouldn't be sitting next to him, So I think that it makes a huge difference there. If I knew that a man was hiring me just for that reason, I don't know. I don't know. I might take the case. I don't know. I wouldn't have taken his case, but
Did you guys watch the Johnny Depp trial? They brought a new one in Netflix. I think it's on Netflix or something. And his lawyer, wow, she was incredible. Did you guys watch it?
Not the documentary, but I saw a little bit while it was happening.
Sheena did. She's weighing in from over there.
I was thinking
she saw it.
She did.
Yeah, because
I thought very aggressive in her cross-examination of Amber Heard. But I think a man would have seemed even worse if he had asked those same questions. I think having a woman did make it a little bit more palatable.
And he ended up being the victim.
Against Johnny Depp.
Yeah. Hi, Christy.
Does anyone have any other questions they want to chime in?
No one has questions. I do have a question. We're looking at your other books because they look incredible, and we just downloaded The Cage. I don't know if you would give a little on House of Fire and The Cage, like 2 seconds.
Sure. House on Fire, as I mentioned, all my protagonists are female lawyers, but House on Fire is a little bit more of what you might call a domestic suspense novel. It's about a very happily blended family, mother, the lawyer, who has a 14-year-old daughter, and new husband who has an 18-year-old son. And they all get along like house on fire. Everything's fine until one night there is an accident, and the daughter, the 14-year-old daughter, sustains a head injury that results in her death. And the 18-year-old boy is arrested for drunk driving. And this fractures the family. The boy denies that he was driving and says that in fact his 14-year-old stepsister was driving. His stepmother is furious that he would lie about such a thing. She doesn't drive, and he's just trying to save his hide from these drunk driving charges. And the family ends up splitting up. And then the ultimate resolution depends on finding out exactly who was driving. That's House on Fire. And it's kind of a tearjerker because it's about a mother losing her daughter, and her grief is just overwhelming. It's overwhelming. The Cage is a workplace thriller, and it's about two women who get into an elevator late on a Sunday night going down. They've both been working late in the office, and there's a power failure and the elevators get stuck and in darkness. And it's some time before rescue arrives and they bring the elevator back down to the lobby level. When the doors open, one of the women is dead of a gunshot wound. And the question is, did she commit suicide because she had a panic attack in the stalled elevator, which is what the survivor claims, or did the survivor kill her? And if she did, why? And it's a whole psychological download of what motive, what could be the victim's motive for suicide, what could be the survivor's motive for murder. And it gets into a lot of issues about the workplace and specifically about the exploitation of labor at all levels, from lowest, factory worker in a sweatshop all the way up to a junior lawyer in a law firm, and how employees are treated by management and in our capitalist society and so forth. And that's the genesis of that. The Cage is the one that's been optioned for a TV series. So I'm anxious to see if it actually comes to the screen, and will, I think, be pretty thrilling.
When will that be coming out?
It's only been optioned at this point, and with the writer's strike currently going on, it's anybody's guess whether and when it will happen. But if it does, it will be on Apple TV.
Well, congrats. Her too should be on TV too.
I agree. Good.
Does anybody have any other questions? At the end of the novel, Kelly picks truth over her career. What drove her to this decision as the writer behind it all? And would it have made a difference if she came to this decision earlier on?
I think other women would have been spared. What finally drives her to it is this hotel maid who, once again, Benedict is choosing his victims not because they're sexy young girls. He's just grabbing a woman. And this woman does everything right. She tells people, she tells her employer, she calls the police, she gives a statement, she perverts, and she does everything that the other women should have done. And I think that really, and the fact that Benedict still expects Kelly to come and represent him after what he's done to her is what puts her over the edge. But I think at this point she knows that he's got to be stopped. His man is a monster, and the only way to stop him is to go public. Now she assumes, she believes from the moment he tells her, she believes in what he says, that she will destroy her career if she ever goes public, the fact that she's been representing a serial rapist. And she believes it all the way up to the end. And in fact, she surrenders her law license and leaves the law altogether rather than fight any charges about having revealed, confidential client communications. She's willing to make that sacrifice at the end, having experienced everything that she did.
As the writer, how difficult was it for you to write the rape scenes? I know Kelly's is the one we get the most details about. As the reader, I'm glad it was right at the front because it was really hard to get through. And
although I was careful to pull the camera back.
Yeah.
The actual, happens off screen, off page, you might say. But
like you're in her thoughts.
It's in her thoughts. You're aware of what's happened. I did not want to do a graphic description of the rape scene. I didn't think it was necessary. I thought having the cat sitting up on the shelf watching what was happening, and then later worrying that a camera was watching the whole thing as well, I thought that was as far as we needed to go. And then the other rapes were, the women were just recounting historically what happened, without ever actually getting into the nitty-gritty of the attack. I've read other books, including revenge, women seeking revenge against the rapist, where they do, really get into the graphic violence of it. And I guess there's some context where that is necessary to really bring home how awful it is, but I didn't think it was necessary here. And I was happy to be able to pull the camera back, and back away and just deal with the aftermath, which is what the book is really about, is the aftermath of these attacks.
I liked how you put us in there when she kind of drugged herself. I was like screaming in my head, and it's hard to read it because you know what's coming and you're like cringing for a few pages, like waiting for it to happen. But that was a good piece. As much as I hate watching or reading about it, it was a good one.
Oh yeah, and like the helicopter and like her getting put into that taxi, and it was all like it's good, very descriptive.
So horrible for her and so humiliating for her. And then
Oh
when
my
she
God.
realizes that it was captured on video, and
Video.
out there, it's just, so awful for her.
What was the decision about, I liked it, this is not a criticism, about not having her go any further with Rick as much as he tried?
Just, I think that it was all, I mean, she's raw at this point. She's been through a harrowing experience of being a victim, through the harrowing death of her husband, sitting in this death watch. I think she finds him attractive. She admits as much that, she's not a nun, even though she lives like one. She does have these urges and impulses. But I think that she has never in her marriage so far acted on these. And I think that's because she does love her husband. She is hoping that he'll come out of this, but she's also a mother with children, and she's not going to have dates, while their dad is lying in the bedroom. But I wanted to give her some hope. I mean, I don't want Kelly to live forever as a nun. I think that once a suitable recovery/mourning period ends, I think that Rick is going to be around. I think he's going to continue to pursue her, and I think she may reciprocate.
In your view, was he a good guy? I personally read him as a good guy until he tested her at the hotel. I did not like that scene. And then I thought he was going to switch, but then he came back as kind of like a good guy again. So was he a good guy for
Yeah,
you?
he's a mixed bag. I think he's a journalist out for a scoop, out for a story. He wants to, just like Roman and Farrow, wanted to pursue the story for the right reasons. It's an important story. It needs to be told. But I think sometimes you do what you have to do to get a story. And he knew that she wasn't telling, and he knew that she was sitting on this really important information, and he was going to do what he had to do to get it out of her. And he was testing her to see if she had a, post-traumatic stress reaction to his attempting to kiss her. And yeah, I think he was bending some rules there.
Pushed it.
I think you were
too
right.
Far.
Hmm?
That he pushed it too far.
Yeah.
There.
I think you could certainly question his journalistic ethics on that point. And the fact that he did lie to her about his father having Alzheimer's, and she discovers this lie. He did a number of kind of tricky things to try to get the story out of her. Yeah.
We're reaching the hour mark. I don't want to keep you too long, but before I get to my last three kind of like wrap up questions, they're not long ones. Does anybody have anything they want to ask, say, chime in about? No.
Okay, Tina has one.
Yes.
I just like that. I mean, you talked a little bit about how the hotel person finally did the right thing, right, and reported it. But it's interesting from the outside, you think you got to report the thing. But it was interesting to me that all the victims, they had the reason for why they did what they did. And it's not always the right thing to do that, right? There's certain things to sacrifice. So it's easy to be like, she should have done something. She should have, fessed up earlier or turned him in. They could have avoided all the things. But great job kind of painting the picture of why it's a lot more nuanced than that. And it's easy
I think
from the outside, but it's not right.
I tried to portray different very valid reasons why women would want to maintain silence. And I do think that there are valid reasons, but I also wanted to portray the difference between what you might call their individual justice and societal justice at large. And so they've, by keeping silent and taking the money, they've achieved individual justice perhaps, but what are the consequences to the world at large? And that's the tension there.
And it's interesting. I don't know. It's been a couple weeks. I'm trying to remember if you kind of painted that realization for the other women, kind of that societal justice, whether they came to that realization that maybe that should have been. I don't know if you kind of went to that extent for the characters.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Certainly Ashley doesn't believe anything other than her own individual justice is what's important here. She doesn't think, of course, the stakes are lower now that Benedict has been exposed. You might say, why should Ashley sacrifice her professional demeanor and standing when we already know now that Benedict is a rapist? So, if if he hadn't been exposed, maybe she would have made a different decision.
And it would have saved that other woman from getting killed. I'm sure that was a lot of guilt on Kelly not coming forward, you know, and bringing in, what was her name? The one that, the poor one?
Tiffany.
Yes,
The
Tiffany, the
Tiffany.
poor one. I felt so
Yes.
sad for Tiffany. And Tiffany's reason for not telling anybody wasn't even because of the money. It's because nobody believes a girl like me. They wouldn't believe me. And my boyfriend would say it was my fault and I was a whore, you know, and I think there are women in that situation, and I feel so bad for her.
Me too.
She was treated as such a disposable person, you know.
I liked her. It made me so sad for her when she was so happy to be in the beach house with them.
Me too.
We have a gentleman over here would like to know why you named him Benedict, if you have a reason behind that.
Name
You know,
Benedict.
good words. It means, you know, the idea of a benediction is something good. And so it's the reverse of what he is.
That's interesting. We were thinking Benedict Arnold, so yes. look at
Oh,
that.
well, good one. Yeah. I don't think I thought of that.
Did he read along with you, ladies?
No.
You know, I've been worried about men's reaction to this book. I mean, men don't read fiction nearly as much as women do, but I was wondering what would men, and I've been getting some wonderful feedback from men who don't seem to be offended by or think that I'm attacking men at large, but who are like, this guy's a real creep. I'm glad he got his comeuppance, you know, and that was refreshing to hear.
Maybe it makes them open up their minds, as like the debates I always have about women who take NDA money or money just not to go to trial because
Right.
who wants to live that out longer.
Yeah.
What did you hope to accomplish with the publishing of this novel, and what would you say the message is of her too?
Well, you know, what I always hope to accomplish with my books is that they be entertaining and page turning, number one, but that there be a social justice issue in there too. And every one of my books has some social justice issue buried and sometimes not buried, a little bit more prominent. This one is probably the most prominent of all. But I did hope that it would ignite a conversation about the hazards of silence and that the importance of speaking up and telling when this happens, even though it might be very painful. It might cause, like poor Emily, who didn't even have the vocabulary to say what had happened to her. She was so traumatized. But that you just, even though there's valid reasons for maintaining silence, if you can overcome those reasons and do it for the benefit of the rest of humankind, you know, do it.
Are you currently working on anything else? Your next book?
My next book is already done. I'm working on final revisions right now. It will be out sometime next year. It's my first book set in Florida. I can tell our Tampa magazine editor, and it's about gaslighting and mind games and the secret societal issue I sneak into that one is climate change, because I think Florida, the state of Florida, is a petri dish for all of the climate change issues that we're all facing on the planet, and they really come to the forefront in this novel.
When is that out?
A publication date hasn't been set yet, but I'm guessing it'll probably be about this time next year.
Oh, okay. Well, we'd love to have you back if you would mind chatting with us again.
It would be my pleasure.
And the last question is a fun one. What are you reading now?
I've been going through all of Tana French's novels. Do you know her? The Dublin Murder Games. She's a mystery writer, American, but she's lived in Ireland for a long, long time. And she writes these very literary, deep psychological mysteries. And I actually have gotten into the habit lately with my husband of listening, because instead of reading the same book, we listen to audiobooks together, and we will sit back with some wine and cheese and listen to the audiobook. And I love listening to her books on audio, because the Irish accented narrators just color it so much. It really comes alive to me much more than if I were just reading it on the page with my own American voice in my head. So I really enjoy that. And for anyone who's not into audiobooks, I recommend any of the Tana French's books in audio.
I love
Do you-
audiobooks.
Do you mostly read thrillers also?
You know, I really don't. And part of I read as much as people urge me to, and when they ask for blurbs and so forth. But one problem I have with thrillers is because I know all the secrets, I can always guess.
Yeah.
I can always guess the ending, you know, and I'm like, well, you mentioned this on page 12, so obviously, you know, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
A little bit of, you know, a lot of the fun of thrillers is that twist and being caught by surprise. And if you're not caught by surprise, it's not as much fun. What I really enjoy reading the most is contemporary literary fiction. And that's where my literary thrillers being a subgenre there, that, as I mentioned with Tanya French, there's two Philadelphia writers I can recommend. Liz Moore, who wrote a book called Long Bright River, and Alan Drew, who wrote a book called The Recruit. And they're both creative writing instructors at universities in Philadelphia. But they are both thrillers. They have a plot, they have a lot of excitement, but they have all of the prose style and the characterization and the thematic elements that you expect of literary fiction. And that's what I love.
That was it for my questions, but now since you said the element of surprise at the end, was anyone not surprised with who was behind everything in this novel?
Yes. Did anybody guess the wife? No.
I did not.
Good.
I thought at the end, I've always thought it was obvious. I thought the doctor, and then as Javier got, you know, closer to like finding things out, and thought it was like the, I don't know what to call him. I forget.
Yeah.
Fixer,
Fixer, yeah.
Anton. Then I thought, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when it ended up being the wife, I was surprised, especially the way Kelly described her. You know, like this, you know, there was always like
So
the
well
even Javier, when he had
Grandmother,
his interaction, it was like grandmotherly, sweet. Like I kind of feel bad for him, like, oh, poor thing, she has probably no idea what this man is up to, you know, like. So yeah, it was shocking.
She knew everything, and she had a camera on him recording everything he was doing.
The only time I was suspicious of her was when I didn't think she would be behind it all, but like that she knew he was a rapist is what I thought, was when Rick said that she had told everyone at the dinner party that she felt ill and she left after she knew they were in their meeting in the house.
Oh, right. Yes.
I was like, oh, she knows he's a rapist, but she was such like a non-character for most of the book that like she wasn't even on the radar.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that she let the lawyer in with the FBI agents, knowing that they could have found whatever in his computer. I was like, that was weird. Yeah.
Well, I was hoping something would come out about like, because, you know, you kept describing her as like, why would she be with him? She's just this like, you know, dowdy woman, and he's this, you know, big, you know, popular guy and into all this stuff. So I was like, there's got to be something. I don't know what it is, but there's got to be something going on with her.
I thought he was using her like to make himself look better, you know?
Yes. I think that was his reason for marrying her. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also thought something was going to come up strange with her. And I thought it was more the doctor's bodyguard. Like I thought that it was going to be like him in the end. And in the hotel where she's, you know, waiting and hiding out with the kids, like for me reading that, I was just like, I just raced through that because I just thought that he was going to show up. He was going to barrel, you know, through the door, and just, that was that kept me on edge.
Yeah. Well, I knew something was going to happen to that lady in the hot tub, though. I'm like, she's getting in there, and with this, I'm like, no. I'm like, this is not a good idea.
I don't know if I missed this in the conversation, but I know a couple times you said something in regards to the relationship with Rick and Kelly, and maybe in the future, are you going to eventually continue the story, or you're just kind of saying that?
No, I never revisit characters. I always feel like I've put my characters through such a ringer that they deserve a rest, and I'm done with them, and they're done with me.
Got it.
But I wanted to plant a seed for readers to speculate about what might happen in the future.
Yeah.
I really liked it. I have a question for everyone. What did you guys all think when I said at the last meeting that we were reading a book about rape victims and a lawyer, and then after reading it, what'd you think? Like, were you all like, what are you making us read? Ellie's like, yeah.
I wasn't here
I,
for the
I
last
was telling my coworkers at the office yesterday about book club, and they were asking what the book was about, and I described it, and they were like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh, it was. I already have my HR person and someone else buying the book or downloading the book. So it's like, if you read it really quick, you can join tomorrow."
Michelle, I wanted to ask you, I mean, because you selected this for your book club, I think even before it was out.
Yeah.
So what was it about that made you think that it would be a?
I don't remember where I saw it. So in January, I did a list of 20 books that I was looking forward to in 2023. They have not all been book club picks. I think I saw it on NetGalley.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I saved it. And then I reached out to you, I think like months ago.
Pretty early, yes.
Yeah, because I had read what it was about and it seemed very intriguing, and I hadn't started it yet, but I was about to, and I was like, well, I think this would be a really interesting conversation. And I think the whole Me Too movement is a good conversation. And I am not a fan of thrillers in particular, but this one was a great one. I really liked it. I thought it would be a good conversation piece, and the story was great.
Yeah. Bonnie, the other thing I loved was that, I don't know if anybody else picked up on it, Rick was washing the dishes at the end, even though Kelly was like, pushing him away and just acting whatever. Like, he's like, oh, I'm going to make myself very useful. And I'm just going to like, and I was like,
Yeah.
there you go. That's a good thing.
That's what women like.
Right. Anybody would fall in love with the man who washes their dishes.
Mhm.
Yep. I was like, there you go, Rick. You're definitely on the right path.
At the end of the book club, we usually take a photo with our book. Do you mind joining us?
Oh,
Mine doesn't have the cover because I got it on NetGalley. And
Should
then
I-
I'll share the
I
next
have a copy of my own.
if you want. Or you can just
Oh,
smile.
I've got the.
You have
I've got
They're in
the-
your background. Yeah, there you go.
Let me see if I have it on here still.
Mine just went away. Okay. And I take 2 screenshots. One, two, three. I'm gonna do it again just in case. Oh,
Lost your title page.
yep.
Danielle was supposed to join. She must have forgotten.
I lost mine too.
Yeah.
My like interim title page. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone. Our
Nice
next
meeting everyone. Thank you so much.
You
our
too.
next book is
I'll leave now. Right.
Okay.
our next book is Amazing Grace Adams by Fran Littlewood. I put it in the chat if anybody wants the link. It's a more lighthearted read. Coincidentally, I was very surprised. It is also Jenna Bush Today Show book club pick for her book club. That was not on purpose. As far as the author, I've been emailing her and she's responded, but she hasn't committed yet, so I don't know if she's based out of England, so it might be a little bit tough coordinating, but she hasn't.
How did you hear about this book? I haven't heard of the book yet.
I have the same way on NetGalley. So it's about a 45-year-old perimenopausal woman who's like overworked and burned out and overwhelmed and is estranged from her 16-year-old daughter, and on her birthday or her daughter's birthday, I'm not sure which one, like decides to leave everything and go find her and win her daughter back. I've heard it takes place throughout a 1-day scene, but there's a lot of flashbacks to get you to understand the story more.
Is it based in England? Like, is it, or does it? Okay.
Yeah, in London.
Nice.
So we might have the author, we might not. We'll see if she finally decides that she can do it. But that is the next book, and it was total coincidence that it's also a Jenna Bush book club pick. That was not on purpose.
Now the hold on Libby's gonna be super long.
Well, it was just announced yesterday, so get it quick.
Did you decide on a date yet, or is it going to be based on the author's schedule?
I'm waiting for the author. So It would normally be the first or second week of November before Thanksgiving, but I am having surgery at the end of October. So I might push it to like right after Thanksgiving, if it's okay
I
with
know
you.
you did that little poll, so.
Yeah, that was why, because I wanted to see, most people were either right after Thanksgiving, like that Tuesday or Thursday. So I think the consensus was that. I just didn't want to, I didn't know if it was like too far out, extending it like another 2 weeks. So thank you guys for joining again.
Thank you. Good
Thank
seeing you.
you.
And
Thank you
Jenna, thanks for your
coordinating.
new friend. Tell her
Yeah,
thank
this
you
is
for
team
coming.
everybody.
Thanks for letting
Thanks.
me crash.
Thanks for joining us. You're
Bye.
welcome whenever you want.
Sounds great.
We are not an exclusive group.
Thanks, Michelle. Sorry for getting on so late.
No, don't worry. Nice seeing everybody.
Bye.
You
Bye.
too.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
An hour.